This Choircast podcast is brought to you by The Collective. At The Collective, we believe that justice isn't optional, it's actually sacred. That's why we're building a growing library of progressive resources, connecting you with queer and Black-owned businesses, linking to books that challenge the status quo, and delivering content that empowers you to resist fascism with clarity and compassion. So join the movement. Support the mission. Visit The Collective, that's QUOLLECTIVE.com, The Collective, to learn more and get involved.
Hey, it's me.
She's a former mayor. They're a former evangelical pastor with dissociative identity disorder. These two like to talk about the topics you're not supposed to talk about. They might cause you to perspire just a bit, but they'll definitely make you inspired. Let's talk religion and politics, and what spirituality and emotional well-being look like in a post-evangelical world. This is Paul and Ashley on Evangelicalish.
You know it's time for Evangelicalish when Doug on the left gives you the woot woot.
Woot woot.
And you're like, it's like in the Flintstone, cartoon when the whistle went off, like, well, woo, and it's time to leave. Like opposite, it's time to go to Ish when you hear the woot woot from Doug on the left.
Is Doug in? Yeah, Doug's in South Dakota.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how Doug feels about having Donald Trump there on Mount Rushmore. There's quite a move. There's quite a move for that right now. It's so funny. I don't get being a Trump follower altogether, but the worship and adulation is what really just baffles me.
You know what? That is such a good point. It is in no scenario are any of these people in no other scenario would they be advocating for human worship this way.
Yeah.
It is bizarro.
The New York Times did a really interesting piece on Mount Rushmore and why it's built the way that it is. The rock wasn't quite exactly what the sculptor and architect thought it was going to be, and that's why Jefferson is pushed way back and all these. And so it was showing like there is no way to add another face to the mountain without, like, Lincoln's face would fall apart if you start like drilling and blasting next to him. So fortunately, it appears geology may hold us off from that horrible. But the fact that, Doug mentions here they had a bill submitted to add him. And then the fact that somebody would feel like they could propose that bill and not immediately be kicked out of Congress is beyond belief.
Yeah. I have been to Mount Rushmore. Did you know that?
Yes, you have.
Yeah. And I will say it's a lot smaller in person than you imagine it to be.
Okay.
And the same is true about a lot of landmarks. Like I think the St. Louis Arch is a lot smaller than just seeing it on TV.
Oh, okay. The arch is cool though.
Oh yeah, the arch is cool. Mount Rushmore is really cool. It's just smaller, so there's no room for anybody.
But it seems to me what I interpreted your experience to be is like you drive a long ways to get to Mount Rushmore. And then you get there and you're like, ooh, wow, that's amazing. Okay, what do I do now? Then you just like turn around and leave, right? Or is that not your experience?
I don't honestly recall. I think it's neat to be there. I do.
Okay.
And I went that region of South Dakota. Doug will tell us in the chat. I think it's the Black Hills region of South Dakota. It's just beautiful. Like there's a lot of reason to just go and be in that place. And then you're like, yeah, in Mount Rushmore. It's really cool. So, but I was there by myself, and it was all, it would have been fun with family, I think, and taking our kids when they were little.
It's why I really want to see the Grand Canyon, and we don't live that far away from it, but I just feel like I'll get there and be like, oh my God, look at this. And I'll just revel in it for a while. And then it'll be like, okay, let's drive home.
Well, okay. A good friend of mine went with his husband and two girls this last spring break. And he's like, no, you've got to go and just like take it in. So I think maybe what you have to do is plan to, like you know what, rent an RV, drive over, be able to spend a day there, journal, like, take in the beauty, do things more than just like the Chevy Chase and the vacation movie, like, well, okay, let's go, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. I'll have to try it sometime, but
yeah.
I love the experience of sitting by the ocean. And I do love going to see Yosemite, but I'm not the type of person that's like, I'm going to, we don't go to Yosemite very much, considering we live
That
right by
it's
it.
an hour from our front door.
And people come from all over the world to see it. And
Yeah.
we like never go.
But I do think I'm finding, and I don't know if it's because I'm aging or if there's like a movement and like a consciousness shift that affects, like all of us, but I am feeling more and more drawn to experience like natural, like the outdoors. And I wonder if part of it is like the human race is spending way too much time, in front of screens, talking to each other on Zooms. And, but there's just so much, or maybe for me, pulling out of the church and being more in the mental health world. And there's so much conversation about the impact of nature and beauty on your spirit and your mental health. So I feel like, and of course you all have heard me talk about the San Joaquin River, like that has been a symbol for our entire adult lives of renewal and spiritual restoration. I got to have 2 days over at the Central Coast in this lovely little place called Cambria, and met a girlfriend of mine over there who we do some work together. And, one of the like literally just like going over there, having a nice dinner, sleeping in a cool hotel, getting up the next morning and taking a walk on a beach. Like that's just such a wonderful getaway. So we're walking on the beach and we're just talking. And turns out we have kind of a similar story of deconstruction, or like her, faith tradition is like kind of rooted to similar aspects of the charismatic evangelicalism that you and I grew up in. And so anyway, we got to talking, and she's a little bit in the like deconstruction process, but not looking to throw everything out. And so anyway, I would just say, as so many people did for me, including you, Paul, as I've kind of been going through this, like, hey, here are the breadcrumbs, here are the things that were helpful to me, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to talking. And one of the things that came up for me, I was like, when I really boil it all down, I personally, what I have needed to deconstruct, and when I say deconstruct, I mean just kind of move an ideology to the side, stop making it the central main thing, move it to the side to see something different than what I grew up seeing. That's all that means to me. And I just, imagine this like cinder block in my vision, and I just scoot it like this. Two things. One, for me, I didn't realize how what is the word? The personification of God, like making God a man, but it's like
anthropomorphization.
Thank you. Oh my God, that word.
Which is a word I love just because it's so big and
blah 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 blah.
Unwieldy.
I just say personification, but like
that's probably a better word. Yeah, humanizing. How about that?
Humanizing, like just making myself be like, nope, that's not God. There is not that thing. That is not like God is spirit. God, and that was a big shift for me. But getting to the point here, the other big thing that really I think is fundamental. Oh, should I use that word? I should not use that word. That is
foundational. How about that?
Foundational to like a deconstruction process is really naming and getting to the root of all that original sin ideology and theology like does to a person. So there we go. Here's today's topic.
You
I
made
went on
it.
a long journey to get us there, but it was a lot shorter than the hour-and-a-half walk on the beach. So, boom.
Okay.
Original sin.
We're done with it, according to the title of this podcast.
Yes. And Dawn would like for you to put that big word in the
I don't know if I
And
can. I would have
I
to
want
get
to try. You
ChatGPT to
talk.
help me for
I'm
that.
going to do it. You talk about original sin, and I'm
All
going to
right.
put it in the chat because I can
Spe-
spell it. I can't say it.
Spelling bee day. Who can spell anthropomorphization
Oy.
first? Yeah, original sin is, and I have some notes here too to look at. Was never taught by Jesus. It's truly not in the Bible, and it was most famously formulated by Augustine of Hippo, which I love that name. Somewhere around the 400s CE. So some 400 years after the story of Jesus was crafted, and that he was thought to have walked on the earth. And Augustine had a very lascivious life before he became religious. And so when he became this Catholic and this fervent person for God, he interpreted the Bible kind of through that lens. And he also didn't necessarily bother going to the deep original meaning of the text. So he read Romans 5:12, which says, "In Adam's fall we sinned all." Well, it doesn't say that exactly, but that was Augustine's saying that came out of it. In Adam's fall we sinned all. And Augustine began to teach that even an infant that has just taken its first breath is a sinner because of Adam. And then, this was guys like John Calvin, who were real hellfire and brimstone guys and controlling religion guys. They loved original sin. Eastern Orthodox Church never accepted that as a theology. Jesus never endorsed it as a theology. It contradicts the idea that creation was made and it was said it was good. And in Ezekiel 18, there's a passage that says the Son does not bear the guilt of the Father. So it's like so many things in Christianity. You take a Bible verse and you say, okay, I'm going to build a theology out of this. And to do that, you have to ignore a shitload of other verses. And so the problem is that we have a theology that harms people. Like, people are running from Christianity, not just because they were hurt and don't like the people. It's a very humanly harmful theology. And I'll wrap this up so you can join in. But I now, having been a life coach for a number of years, I'm now working on my master's in marriage and family therapy. The idea of telling a child you were born evil, you are incapable of good, is so harmful to the human psyche, because people tend to rise up to the expectations you have of them or live down to the expectations. And when we're telling everyone, you're terrible, you're inherently bad, God hates you, that's going to have an impact on how you see yourself and then how you act out of that self-image. So it's a horribly terrible theology. And so I'm interested, why do you feel that is foundational and a block you had to move?
Yeah. Well, so first I'll just say this, as you always kind of cast the most negative and extreme expression of evangelical stuff. That's just a little bit who you are. One, two, you grew up in this Assemblies of God world where you could at any second think a wrong thought and be condemned to hell. So you
Right.
grew up in the most
If
extreme.
Jesus came back at that second, I'd be left behind, even though I'd been perfect for 7 days before.
That's right. And then I grew up Baptist and then, moved into the charismatic end of evangelicalism with the Vineyard and ultimately the whole kind of Bethel stream of things. And I think that I was a little bit bubble wrapped because I got the all have sinned, all have sinned, all have sinned, fallen short, fallen short. Thank God for God. And once you say these, this 1 or 2 sentence prayer, you're good for the rest of your life. And so the reason why I bring that up is I know that if anybody from our old church world would have heard what you just said, they'd be like, oh, come on, Paul. That's not what we taught in our church. You are taking, but it's almost worse when you're in the like bubble wrap of, but it's okay because faith, because, because Jesus and Jesus, like Jesus lifts all that off of you. It's almost worse. So I land in my 40s and I start going through this deconstruction process. And I'm like, surely, on the one hand, I always had this North Star vision and connection with this all-loving, perfect, divine kind of thing that I still feel a connection to and does pull me forward. On the other hand, in my entire life, I mean, I said the 2-sentence prayer when I was 4 years old and like walked a pretty disciplined, like spiritual Christian faith my entire life. I still had trouble. Like every day I felt guilty that I wasn't, that I didn't pray enough that day, that I didn't enter the throne room in the right way, that I, there was, when I would quiet myself and try to access that connection to spiritual stuff, all I could think about was what I had done wrong and how I was not good enough. And so
don't
it was a
belong here.
block. Yeah, like it was a little bit of the imposter syndrome, all that kind of thing. So anyway, I'm saying that as like, I don't think people from our old church world are actually listening to us, but if they were, here's the rebuttal to, whatever is the rebuttal to the rebuttal. It is an important thing to stop and consider. I don't care how grace conscience your church environment was. This original sin thing, for one thing, you can debate it all day long as to whether or not that was really what Jesus was lifting up, really what was being said in Romans, all these things. And two, like its tentacles go way deep in ways that you probably don't realize, is my bottom line.
Yeah. It's interesting, a light pushback on people. Christians would say they don't teach that. I don't know how most Christians could say they don't teach that. And I would say even the Baptist would say flesh is evil, right? Like I'm once saved, always saved, but flesh is evil. And human beings are incapable of doing good without God. If you don't have God, I mean, wouldn't that be true?
Yes, but I guess what I'm saying is, in my experience, there was always two parts of this, like two sides of this coin. One, you are the human that's terrible upon birth, blah, blah, blah. Two, it's okay because Jesus grace extends. You never have to worry about it because Jesus grace. And I think a lot of the people that we hung out with in our church days would say we were always focused on the second part. We were never trying to emphasize here. And my point is, because it's part of the same coin, if you stop and reflect on how you have ingested that and how that affects your view of yourself and how and whether you can access divine connection, it is a bigger deal than you think. That's what I'm saying.
And I mean, it is foundational to the theology that God needed to do a human sacrifice of his son / himself. That had to be done because human beings were inherently evil, because Adam, not Eve, Eve ate it, but we don't really care because women aren't as important. But Adam bit, an apple, some would say, but Eastern Orthodox would say a pomegranate. And because of that, we're all foundationally evil. And if we don't, put our faith in this human sacrifice that was done in the horrific Roman Empire, we will burn for eternity. And that's a basic of the theology. You have to be evil to begin with. And that's why you need this very bloody human sacrifice that God somehow determined in his head when he was creating it. Like, I know they're going to sin. And so I'm going to craft this thing where I have to do a human sacrifice to myself for me to forgive their sins, which is like why do you have to do that? Like, why can't you just forgive?
If Jesus were in America today, what would he say about the right-wing evangelical church? Pastor Paul's new novel, Religious Right, Religiously Wrong, a modern-day parable, answers this question in a riveting story of a mysterious miracle-working stranger who upsets a conservative, evangelical town with his critique of their political views. Will the pastor and people of the local megachurch listen? Or will the church crucify the messenger all over again? Religious Right, Religiously Wrong is the story America needs right now. James Fallows, writer for The Atlantic and former speechwriter for President Jimmy Carter, says Paul's book is very much worth reading and could not be more timely. Wayne Jacobson, co-author of the mega bestseller, The Shack, says this novel will confront fears and challenge the reader to a more excellent way of living and loving. Religious Right, Religiously Wrong, a modern-day parable is available on Amazon or at our website, evangelicalish.com.
I think you have much more of a you think about the theology of things a little bit deeper. I think most congregants in the church communities we were in would not be realizing what you're saying. And so this is why I'm coming back around and saying, like, hey, even those of us who are like, oh, it doesn't affect me because I grew up in a grace culture, I'm just encouraging, stop for a second and consider it actually may. It certainly did for me. And that's all I can say is
Yeah.
it certainly did for me. And then obviously people have to do their own evaluation. But like after probably 2 or 3 years of kind of tail spinning, and I in my deconstruction journey, which by the way, 2 words I'd like to never say again. Like if we could, like, I feel like it's so overdone if we could think of another way to say it. But anyway, like at 2 or 3 years of tailspin, but always in the middle of that I felt like I was stuck in a jello mold of like, yeah, but I know there's divine. I know there's perfect love. I'm encased in it. I just don't understand why the practice and the little Bible stories that always kind of worked for me in the past are not cutting it. And then, which by the way, a friend of mine, Janet Hagesburg, wrote an amazing book called The Critical Journey. And she and another guy wrote that book. It's pretty like, I don't know, it's kind of out there quite a bit. She talks about hitting the wall. And there's a point where like just in life, you hit this wall, everything falls apart, including your faith, and then the like reconstruction on the other side. But all this to say, like, I never fully realized how much original sin theory was impacting my ability to experience like calm and love and all that on the inside of me, not anything somebody on the outside of me could necessarily do for me.
Yeah. And now working through what I'm learning in school, telling a person, particularly a child needs to be told by their parents they are loved and valued and safe. And if we're not given that, it creates a trauma in our life that impacts our life forevermore. And the focus on the family, Christianity, takes that away from a parent if they fully buy into it. I have to understand that these little children are inherently evil because they'll lie to me. And in therapy, a child telling a fib to try to get out of trouble isn't evil. It's a natural human survival tactic. And instead of saying, you're terrible for telling that fib, child, you instead say, I care about you so much, even if you mess up. You're going to be okay with me, so you don't have to lie. And so the sin theology creates sin. It's what it says in Romans, like the law creates sin. It's not the answer to sin. It creates sin. The rules are not the answer. And so it's so important to tell a child and then somebody who has been traumatized by a controlling religion, no, you're not bad. You're good. And when somebody says I did something bad, what I always do with them is like, who told you that's bad? Why is that bad? Let's work through why you did it rather than just this declarative of right and wrong, good and bad.
So I have one more question for you on the like, what is this sort of what are the contours of this big block that might be in your vision, that like we're trying to shift it. And then I want to pivot to like, okay, shifted, like let's move forward. What
Right.
is living without that kind of thinking look like? So the question is, talk about Romans 3, all have sinned.
Yeah.
And how might a person think differently about that passage?
And it's inevitable whenever I start talking about it's important to love yourself on social media, some Christian will come in and say, all have sinned. Romans 3:12, I believe it is, or 3:23. That's what it is. And and in some ways it's a little bit of a get out of hell free card for Christians, because when they mess up, they'd be like, well, we're all sinners, kind of the devil made me do it kind of way of looking at things. But when Romans 3:23 says this, and we had our friends Keith and Matthew on who wrote the book Reading Romans Right. Like when you read Romans, you have to understand there's a very interesting style of writing that book that is different than the other books around, which again goes back to like God didn't write every word of this thing. It's a very interesting, and I think Romans is a fascinating book because Paul, we can know that he wrote this, the Apostle Paul, and he was a brilliant guy. And this is a brilliant thesis on Christianity. Even if you don't agree with it, it's a brilliant writing. But what he's doing is arguing with this imaginary person. This is what this type of writing is. And so imagine an imaginary person saying, well, I don't need your Christianity because I'm Jewish and we are God's chosen people, and therefore I'm good. And Paul is saying, oh, so because you're Jewish, you think you're better than the Greeks? Like, all humans are valuable and all humans have flaws. Being of a particular heritage or lineage doesn't make you better than somebody else. That's what he's saying. He's saying everyone has flaws, and by converse, then the rest of Romans 3, 4, 5 is all about how can you say Adam's sin affected every human without them participating in it at all? I mean, we believe a baby is born sinful, then we come up with these loopholes to get them to heaven when they pass away. But it's this idea of Adam's sin impacted everybody, but Jesus' act didn't. Like, Jesus' act is more powerful than Adam's, so why do you give Adam's this unavoidable power, but Jesus requires a step of you saying what I call a magic prayer and joining a church? So Romans 3 in no way is saying everybody's bad, everybody's a sinner. And in fact, if you read all the way through Romans, it's saying absolutely the opposite of that as a whole in the story. Did I describe that well?
Yeah, I think so. I personally find Romans to be a little bit difficult, and I've listened to you talk about this for a long time. And then we had, the Reading Romans Right, which probably I just need to buy that book and like read it. But I don't know. Some of this is a little. I'm not personally drawn to like understanding all the nooks and crannies of things. I kind of go a little more on what I've experienced. But anyway, I think
I think everybody needs, because you're going to have Romans 3:23 thrown at you when you're having this discussion with a Christian, and so you need at very least to be able to say, well, I know people who say that it doesn't mean that, and they can explain it to you, and I'm not into all that.
Yeah.
But that's not what that verse says in my mind,
Yeah. So, okay. So there you go. Maybe we should drop the link to that book in the chat, Reading Romans Right. And we could also have the fellas come back on and talk more. But anyway, that could be like a bonus round of.
I felt like I think you just went away from the podcast there. I just lost you because we were in the weeds of Romans.
That's kind of my reaction. But anyway, whatever. You put it out there. That's good. Okay, so now I'm curious, and those in the chat can chime in. Obviously, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and I have some thoughts, but I'm curious, practical tips, like moving forward. Um, let's say we are pulling the roots up of this up out of our consciousness, our spiritual world. What do you experience? How do you experience things differently? How would you coach somebody on like how to reorient without an original sin theology?
Um, so what I hear from a lot of people through the time I've been doing this work is they'll say, "Okay, I don't believe the way I used to believe, but am I taking my children to hell?" You know, it's
Oof.
it's like such a powerful thing that has been
Yeah.
indoctrinated into us that it's like, what if like God is going to be really mad at me for this? And, what if I'm wrong?
Mm,
What if I
mm.
really am walking a path to hell and taking my family with me? And so you really have to start to unwind the idea that I'm bad. And if I don't recognize that, then I'm on the wrong side of God. And we can, I think we've talked before about just even unraveling like what God is. But just from a human standpoint, if we can start to see, actually, I want to do good. Like there is a desire in me to be a good person. And I feel good when I help somebody with, load their groceries in their car or something like that. When I do human service to another human, it actually feels good. That's in me. And when we start to build on I'm basically good. All humans have goodness in them and the ability for good. I think it starts to change how our brain, well, I know it starts to change how our brain processes input. And then when we have the guilt and shame of our life, even am I taking people to hell? We can start to say, okay, where does that shame come from? Well, I stole a pack of bubble gum when I was 12, and my dad really told me that was evil. And I've been ashamed of that deep down in my soul. I don't think about it every day, but it laid a burden in my heart. And I didn't steal the bubble gum because I was an evil little kid, an evil human, evil flesh. It's how human beings learn to interact with the world. We want bubble gum as a little kid, and that desire is really a big desire. And so, oh, dad's not going to buy it for me, I'll steal it. And we have to learn like, oh, that's not a good way to interact with other humans and be the good person I am. So you just starting to unravel the I've done bad things to why did I do those things? Did I do them because I'm inherently evil? Or is there another way to humanistically look at myself and at other human beings as being inherently good?
So we this I find this very interesting at this stage of my life. Probably one of the most impactful things, if not the most impactful thing in my life. Well, I mean, like getting married, having kids, and then and this would be the top three. Um, my mom passing in 2021, and like being literally bedside, final moments, and her passing, and still feeling that like a spiritual connection in ways that like so real, like way more real than any sort of spiritual vision or interaction, faith thing I had going on when I was in the charismatic church. And um it made it so possible for me to understand the concept of spirit slash eternal versus temporary and human ideas, concepts that were introduced my youngest age in the church. What I feel like you're saying just there is like that human spirit, that life force that I think is eternal and goes on and exists at the same time as our temporal realm, we would call that kingdom of God or heaven or whatever. That spirit realm um, is comprised of this beautiful life force in every human. I think so. This whole like standoff between humanism and Christianity, and like we will fight about these things. I feel like these things actually marry up really well. These ideas of, there is a spirit in all of us and it goes on, past our physical bodies. I mean, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like if
Yeah.
that is, humanism would say the same thing. Like, yeah, every human, like the life of every person is valuable in and of itself, period, full stop. That's enough. That's enough to have value for that person. I don't know. I think that kind of like these two ideas don't have to be so at odds.
No, I don't think so at all. There's a whole bunch of things to unwind in that of like, who is God? Is God this guy with a long beard sitting on a throne that is the most judgmental, thin-skinned MFer in the universe? And people, oh no, God is love. I'm like, God is love? Like this God that will get angry at me if I have lust in my heart, which he created and put in me. It's such a crazy thing. And the example I love to give in all of this, and this is not like my bragging on me being a great parent, but one thing that I always felt really good about that I did with our kids, and our kids have reflected this back to me now that they're adults as being important, is I sat them down one day and said, when grandma and grandpa say, Santa's watching and you're not going to get presents if you're not good, that is not true. That's not true. And I told them, you don't get presents because you deserve them and you've earned them. You get presents because for Santa and your parents, it is a joy to give you gifts. It makes us so happy to see you thrilled at getting a gift on Christmas morning. And so whenever anybody tells you Santa is keeping a list of right and wrong, forget that. We'll just make it our little secret, and we'll know that you get gifts because you're incredibly loved, not because you've been good enough to earn them. And both children have said that left an impact on them.
And to which our daughter said, Santa and Jesus sound like an awful lot like the same.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, like we want Santa to be more Jesus.
But from a clinical perspective, that telling a child that everything you do is getting graded and measured is a tragically harmful. Thank you, River Hugger. She says in the comments, I do wish I had a dad like you. Has an impact. And likewise, when we tell somebody, you didn't do that because you were bad. You did that because you were using the only tools you knew to survive. And so that doesn't mean it was okay. Like if you harmed somebody else, it's not okay. Out of unhealthiness, we do things that harm other people, and that's not okay. But we don't do them because we're inherently evil. We do them because everything about being human is fighting for value, safety, and purpose, or safety, value, and purpose. And sometimes we don't have healthy tools to get there. And so we use really unhealthy means to try to do that.
I read these words in a book. I feel like it was like an internal family systems, like a Christian presentation of internal family systems, which for me along the way over the last 4 or 5 years, that has been so helpful to like kind of bridge these worlds of, my church version of me and then like my mental health version of me. So I recommend for anybody that sounds right for. And this book talked about like, you don't have to walk past your shame to get to divine love. And that's where I kept getting stuck. And my entire, like, again, from age 4 to like 44 or 48 or whatever, that is always how I felt when I would try to quiet myself and like have my, my regimented, prayer time or connection time with God. I would never admit it because if I knew in my church culture, I couldn't be honest about that without getting like sort of dogpiled and like, no, you can't feel that way. Stop feeling that way. That's not but what I always felt was I was ashamed and I had to walk past that shame. And sometimes I could and sometimes I couldn't. And so when I put away the original sin stuff, there is no shame. So then it's just like open access to what you would, however you want to imagine that divinity and that perfect love. For me, I think of, wholeness. I think of like the Holy Spirit that lives in every single thing, every person, like is connected to that divine space or whatever. And like, I imagine, I see it as kind of like a spirit, like a fog. And I just think of all those little bits of divinity in every person contributing to that wholeness and it all being held together by divine something. And it's just always there. And I don't I truly don't have to do or say any, like, it doesn't matter who I am, what I've done, what I've not done. That divinity is always there. And I just get to like go sit by the lake.
Yeah.
And experience it. That's all.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I can remember in my hearing God phase of Christianity, even I was striving towards this idea of
Yes.
goodness.
A lot of
And
pressure.
I tell the story of leading a small group and I'm like, oh, I need to pray for forgiveness of my sins so God will come and be with us at group tonight. And I'm just, oh God, forgive me. What do I need to, what must, do I need to like harm myself to, to have you come to group tonight, and I just remember hearing in my head, this like, we have so many better things to talk about than this. And I don't know where that voice came from now. It may be divine. It may have been one of my parts, but it was just like, what the fuck? If you want something good to happen in group, focus on the goodness that can happen in group rather than, oh, I'm this terrible person.
Yeah. That's it right there. So
if
I
I can,
love
if
that.
I can say one more thing, too, like when you're a child, your parents are God. They are the representative of God. I put in air quotes to those who are listening on audio. They are all good and all right. Everything they say, you cannot question. It is the truth. Everything they do shows who you are. And again, they're supposed to give you safety, value, and purpose. And if that's not happening, which is far too common in our occurrences, a child can only say, I must deserve this behavior. If something highly traumatic, physically harmful, emotionally harmful, it leaves a mark on a child to say, well, that adult, that parent cannot be bad. That's not possible because they're God. So therefore, I have to be bad for this bad thing to be happening. And we take that on as an identity, trauma-induced identity that says, I'm bad. I'm bad at my core. And therefore, everything I do comes through this filter of I'm bad. And if a bad thing happens, it's because I deserve it. And we've kind of laughingly talked about the fact that like when my son would strike out on the baseball field, I'd be like, oh, I must have sinned, somewhere along the way. And it's just something that that is real and we have to be healed from to be able to see ourselves differently.
Yeah. Your wife did not know that you were thinking that, by the way.
I know.
Ugh, I hate that. Okay, so.
And it's why somebody is defensive and passive aggressive and all those things. It's like, I can't be wrong. You can't come to me and tell me I did something wrong, because to be
Oh
wrong
yeah,
is
it's
bad.
shame. It's just this. It's
Yes.
like defensiveness. It's like when it squirts out. It's like squeezing a toothpaste. When defensiveness like shoots out, I don't know that it's always the case, but it seems like oftentimes in my
Pretty good
experience, I was
indicator.
like, there's like a shame thing going on in that
When
situation.
you have a powerful identity that says I'm good, when somebody comes and says, hey, I need to bring something to your attention, we can say, oh, good. I want to hear this. I want to
Yeah,
learn and get better. And if I did something that bumped into you, I want you to tell me,
yeah,
which is
so true.
hard. It's
So
hard
it's
to
so
get there.
hard. It's taken me a long time to get better at that, and I think I still struggle with that. But at least I think I'm more aware of it. Um,
So should we sort of spiritually ground this in?
mhm. Yes, that's just what I was going to say. So I was going to give like a little helpful, I think, oh, whatever, you guys can be the judge of whether or not this is helpful and let me know. But I I want things to be really practical. I love vision and concept and stuff like that, but then like for me, I want it to translate into practical steps. So I was wondering if maybe we could encourage everybody to try this over this next week. Um, so just kind of evaluating like, hey, is the original sin thing still playing out for me? Is it still affecting my mental health, my connection to others, and my connection to love? Maybe a way to do that would be quiet yourself just a couple of minutes and just imagine yourself being connected to however you would envision this divine space and love and that perfect love, and just notice what immediately comes up for you. Like, is it something that gets in the way? Is it like even if it just seems like a distracted thought, I don't believe that there is such a thing when you're like trying to have sacred time and space. In my experience, something that's like, oh, why did this weird thought come up from 2 or 3 days ago? That's like, I chose Fritos pay attention to what it is and write it down. And then go back to like, let me try to observe and connect with this divine love. What else comes up? Pay attention to it, write it down. Do that for like 5 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 times this next week. And then look back on what you wrote at the end of the week and have reflection time on that. You know, anyway,
Yeah.
I feel like there'll be like there's like these clues that come up and it's like a little story unfolds as to like maybe what's going on for you as you try to access this like spiritual connection.
Yeah,
My
I
thought.
love that. And I would love anyone who tries that to like share how it goes, like
Yeah.
either on our socials, or you can email through the website, paul@pastor-paul.com, and just let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's really, really powerful. It's, at the end of yoga when they sometimes say the divine in me, what is it? What do they say? The
Sees the
divine in
divine in
me,
you.
see the divine in you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I couldn't think of the word because it's at the end of a 60 or 90-minute hot yoga class. I'm like, bitch, get out. Like, let me out of this room. But I really do trust the power of that divine that I think I know is in every person.
Mm,
And it's a beautiful thing when people turn inward and start accessing that.
yeah. And my journey with my DID parts is the parts are looking at each other saying, you did this and it hurt me, like internally, self-hatred, uh, all of those things. And a part named Paul is kind of the main part that everybody's like, oh, that part is so cruel to the rest of us. And the work that we're all working on now internally here is, there's a reason Paul did that. Like, he was trying to protect the other parts, and the only way he knew how was to like stuff the bad parts of us that weren't that John Wayne man into a drawer somewhere. And it took cruelty, and the cruelty that part of me learned was the cruelty of my abusive father. And so Paul then became the abusive father to the rest of my inner parts. But so the choice now is like, do we vote Paul off the island? Not possible.
Yeah.
It's not going to, it would be just the reverse of what was happening before, stuffing a part of us away. So instead, it's a really hard process of the parts saying, I understand why you did what you did. And it wasn't good. It harmed me. I'm not saying it was okay, but I'm saying I'm gaining some compassion by understanding why it was all you knew to do. And it did, in fact, in some ways, save us. And that's a hard work.
When I hear you talk about that inner dialogue and that inner conflict, and I think of each of those parts as, as different parts of you, different personalities. It's easy for me to think about work with many human beings and like stakeholder reconciliation and the deep conflict that exists and that we experience in our own community and certainly broader, national and even global. And I think of some of the hardest of the hard reconciliation that I've seen happen with many people. And I think not like as hard as that was, none of it was as hard as dealing with that. If it's all, dealing with the inner conflict that's in one person.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I wrote some notes this morning of a little blessing, I guess I would call it. And I hesitate to use that word because I know that can be sort of Christian triggering. But so I want to give you a real quick blessing before we get out of here. And that doesn't mean I'm better than you and sending you something from on high down to you. It is, we are paracletes. We are paracletes walking alongside one another.
Divine in you, divine in me. And it's the encouragement is what it is.
Yeah. And bearing each other's burdens and all of that. And before I do that, I do want to mention on our website, evangelicalish.com or pastor-paul.com, you get to the same website either way. There is a page that has frequently asked questions about theology. And so you can go on that page and find Original Sin and read more about what we're talking about today, why original sin is not a thing, and why I disagree with the theology. And so go check that out. And also I have a course called Deconstruction U, and there is a part on sin theology that you can get. It's pretty cheap. I don't know. And that is available. And if you can't afford it, send me a message and we'll make sure you can get it. But there are ways to also learn and educate ourselves on those things. So,
good resources.
What's that?
Good resources.
Yeah. So I just bless you to be able to lay down anything that told you you were born unworthy and that your flesh is filthy and that the acts of trying to satisfy the needs of that flesh are evil. That you were always using the tools you had available to you to have safety, value, and purpose, and pursuing that makes you human, not evil. And I want to bless you to hear from heaven laughter and joy rather than guilt and judgment. That when you always tried to appease an angry God, you were fighting against the indoctrination in yourself. And it's just something that you can lay down and have peace in your spirit and your body. And you are not fallen. You are becoming. You're not your wholeness, but you're journeying there. And that is beautiful. That is good. And that is worthy of honor because you're good. And there is no God in the universe that is angry at you. I don't know. Maybe that's helpful.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right.
Cleansing breath, cleansing breath. Okay. Oof.
Be done with original sin. It's a terrible theology and it's a terrible anti-human view.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So many more things to say about that, but we should probably leave it right there. Here we are at an hour. Thanks to those of you who have joined with us live. We are buoyed always by your comments and the feeling of connection as we gather here now on Sunday mornings, 9 a.m. Pacific. Be sure to tell your friends and post and like and do all the things. And, let's help build this community at Evangelical-ish. And
we really do need your help with that. Just, share, hit the notification bell on YouTube. Those things, we're trying to break through the algorithm right now.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. So all of those things really help. And I want to say hi to Richard. Richard sent us a message this week that he just loves being able to turn on our podcast and our messages every time he goes for a walk every day. And so, Richard, we love you. Thank you for your encouraging word you sent this week.
Means a lot.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Be
Love
sure
you.
to share your experience with your reflections this week, and we'll talk about them next week.
Bye, all.